Jack Whiten.
And I'm Faye.
This is Faye.
Jack and Faye.
We've got the pleasure of a conversation with Barry Lucas, legendary promoter of Lancaster University. How are you?
All right, I think. It's a bit early on a Sunday lunchtime, but yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah, same here. So, I mean, can we start off for the audience? Can we explain what does a promoter do? Because I think we're all promoters here. That's the idea. We think we've got an idea of what a promoter does, but we could be very wrong.
I think a promoter. I did something which was quite unusual in student union days. And student union, the college circuit back in the day was a very important circuit. It was bands started off in pubs and clubs like they do today. There was bit of the smaller clubs, perhaps a few hundred capacity. Then you moved on to the college circuit, colleges of FE, etc., and polytechnics in those days, and then the bigger universities, and then the premier two were Leeds and Lancaster. It was Leeds on its own until I sort of managed to knock them off their perch, but we were the big two. But I was unusual in the sense that I was the first full-time entertainment manager in the country. I was a professional. I was a student social secretary at Lancaster, but then I was offered a job and nobody else had done that. No other college or university had done that in anywhere in the country, or in Europe for that matter. So it was slightly different. It was my job to make sure I had successful shows on, because at the end of the day that's how my salary was being paid. So I put on acts, and it's a long way around to telling you what I think a promoter should do. I think a promoter should put on acts that people want to see. And that's slightly different from putting on acts that you want to see. It's too many social sects put on acts that they wanted to see, and I lost a lot of money on the back of that, you know.
I think I fall into that trap. Very much an interesting band. You can't try and convince your audience what they want to see. Your audience are the ones who buy tickets.
Yeah, you can't lecture your audience. You can't tell them this is what you ought to be watching. They are really good. You can try it. I mean, I did it a few times and I lost money on everyone, you know. You wouldn't believe it, but I put AC/DC on one year, got 500 people, lost a fortune. I believed in them. I saw the very first show in London at the Marquee Club. There was about 120 people there. 100 people were from the music business, so it was obvious what was going to happen with that band. So I put them on a year later at Lancaster, got 500 people, lost money. A year later I got offered the date again at 600 quid. And so I thought, well, people have heard of them by now. You know, the first album had been really successful. I said to put it on. I got 600 people there and lost money again. So it doesn't work. You know, it's not what you want; it's what your audience wants.
Where would you scout? Where would you find bands back in the day? Because I've got a ton of resources from my friends. We go on Instagram, or we can tell each other about these bands. But I suppose you have to go and buy a physical CD and listen to somebody, or go see them somewhere. Where would you go to watch live music?
That's very sweet. A CD,
Well,
vinyl.
Yeah. So we love our tapes, so we still buy tapes.
Oh well, I love my vinyl. I've just downsized from a big Victorian house down to a bungalow in Heysham, and I lost the argument on my books, but I won the argument on my vinyl of what you could downsize to. Well, back in the days of the 60s and the 70s, and through to the 80s, there were three newspapers: Melody Maker, NME, New Musical Express, and Sounds. Sounds came along slightly later. They came out every week. They were full of what we called then the underground music scene. It was underground because your mums and dads would never have heard of these bands, but they'd fly out, they'll sell million-copy albums and fly out shows. But your mum and dad, who's led who? You know, that kind of thing. Not quite who's the Beatles, but it wasn't far off. So you got all your information on tours basically through newspapers, which sadly don't exist anymore in that sense. And there were a handful of shows on TV, you know, back in the day, Ready Steady Goes, etc. But then later, more serious ones like the Old Grey Whistle Tests and the Tube were good music programmes, pushing out quite often new music as well. And then, of course, the legend that is John Peel, who broke every band going, as far as I know, and was one of the nicest people I've ever had on, and did about 3 or 4 shows in the Sugar House for me. That was really great.
Nice. You mentioned before, but you opened the Sugar House for Lancaster. So you're actually working out of the Great Hall and in the Sugar House.
Yeah. We the Sugar House project had been something from 1972. There was a lot of political unrest on the campus. And the students had set up a parallel university with a load of university lecturers, because some university lecturers had been sacked, the David Craig affair, for political bias, not just in their teaching, but in their marking and exam marking, which was ridiculous, because, I mean, I'd been taught by those guys. They might say that a book was a right-wing novel, but it was probably the best book written in the English language, kind of thing. They were academic enough to be able to distinguish their political beliefs from their job. So anyway, massive. And what part of the Panorama came up and did a whole hour-long programme on troubles at Lancaster, and it was national news and big demonstrations from around the country. All coming to Lancaster. The report, the Lord Taylor did a report on what the problems were, and he identified one of the major problems was the disconnect between university students up on that hill and the town of Lancaster.
I feel that's very real still today.
Isn't
still
it?
Massively real.
We're trying to surmount.
Absolutely. I mean, it's probably worse today because the expansion of the university has meant that, well, you see the centre of Lancaster, and now if you talk to local people, oh, it's another beautiful building, oh, it's going to be student residence. That kind of attitude, there's a real resentment building up. Now, part of his solution to that was that there should be a social place in Lancaster where students and local people, generally young, but not necessarily, meet in mingle, meet, entertainment, or just sit around having a drink or playing snooker or pool or whatever that was there. And it took me. That was 82. We opened it in 81. Sorry, that was 72. We opened it in 81. So it took 8 years basically to find the place and get it. And we set the Sugar House up. It was meant to be a place for students and for local people. It's one of the reasons why I resigned at Lancaster, because the executive from about 83, 84 were trying to push it that they wanted it student only. And Lancaster gigs have always been open. Leeds University gig, nearly every university had closed gigs. It was students only. I refused to have that because you're not in Leeds, you're not in Manchester, you're not in Liverpool. If you don't go to the gigs at Lancaster University, you ain't seeing those kind of acts without travelling, a 120-mile round trip at the very minimum.
Just trying to get back to these gigs.
I got a letter for the 3rd edition of the book. It was about a 4-page letter from a BBC producer, top BBC producer, who used to live in Bentham, and he started going to the gigs when he's 14 years old. So he went to about 7 years of gigs. He said getting there wasn't too bad. It was getting back to Bentham at 2 in the morning was the problem. He says, but without those gigs, I wouldn't have got drunk with Paul McCartney. I wouldn't have gone on a tube train with Taylor Swift. I wouldn't have been with Bruce Springsteen and getting legless in a London pub. They were all down to the gigs at Lancaster.
So it's amazing that Lancaster has been, at this time, it's being held on a similar platform as Manchester and Leeds. So how did you start that? What were your first moves as a promoter? Because initially we got started because we had some funding, some help, and we had a guiding hand ultimately. I don't know how you take those baby steps.
We had funding in the sense that Lancaster was a collegiate university, or still is a collegiate university. So a friend of we were given, most of the college were given a grant of around £250-350 to do a show, and we just had the Great Hall open, or Central Hall is first called, in 1969, and each college took a turn, so once a term they'd put a show on in there, and Bowland College had got now £350 doesn't sound a lot of money, but it would have got you Led Zeppelin back then, right? So they got £600 to spend on it, and everyone's going, oh, what are they going to come? and he booked the Equals. Well, the Equals were a Top of the Pops poppy reggae band who probably have got more kudos today than they had then, because remember we talked about the underground movement kind of thing. We were all into those bands like Pink Floyd and The Who and McCartney and whatever, so we were into all those bands, and then to get a Top of the Pops band, we were furious. So my friend Gaz Taylor stood against this social sec in the February elections, got elected. He persuaded me to stand for Lonsdale, and I got elected. And we said, right, we've got 200 or 350 quid, let's do a show together. 700 quid. We pulled another college in for, I think it was 250, whatever. We ended up with £1,000. So we thought, we'll book The Who.
Nice.
So we're 19 years old, and we booked The Who as the first act for the Great Hall. The two college presidents of Lonsdale and Bolton tried to stop us because they said, "Are you going to bankrupt the union? They're going to bankrupt the colleges." And we got the signed contract in the post office in Alexander Square just as they were running across the square to stop us. So it went off. So we did it, and of course it sold out, and we made money. So we booked another little band for about 3 or 4 weeks later called Black Sabbath, and that did all right as well. And then we booked Pink Floyd, and they did all right, and so it went on after that. Basically, it proved that you could make money off it. I've still got a newspaper article, and it features me in it, but that's not why I've got it. But it's from the Daily Express. I had a centre page spread on pop goes £1 million of your taxpayers' money, because that's how much colleges lost on pop music, £1 million in 1 year. So we were making money. So
what I often liken promoting to high stakes gambling is the way I've seen it, because you're suggesting, because as a promoter you're taking the risk financially.
Totally.
But you're trying to sell tickets. But there's initially for us, we had this great, it was a string of successes.
And then we had our first major flop was so heartbreaking.
It's also so expensive. I mean, I used to say you can have 6 sellout shows, but you have one really bad one, and that wipes out 6 sellout shows. People don't realise how much money you can drop on a really bad show, and you don't know it's going to be a really bad show, otherwise you wouldn't have booked in the first place. It just, things can coincide, things can go wrong.
You had a very star-studded start. Did Black Sabbath have, in light of the recent departure of Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath getting up to any hijinks? No. I mean, it was outrageous, but I mean, it was early doors. The first album was out basically, and of course, the greatest hits album has got the Hesham gravestones, graves, Saxon graves on it. No, I mean there wasn't a massive amount of damage done in the hall, etc., etc. I mean, we once borrowed I needed a grand piano for Shakin' Stevens on one rag ball, and I went to the director of music and said, "Can I don't want to really hire a grand piano in. Can I borrow a grand piano?" He said, "Well, there's a Bechstein you could have, but no, I don't know, we don't want it." And I said, "Look, these are musicians, they're not going to mistreat your piano, are they?" So anyway, we moved the Bechstein onto the Great Hall stage, and I was up in the balcony watching Shakin' Stevens sitting on the piano playing it with his heels, the keys, and I was going, "Oh my God, please don't anybody from the music department walk in now." Thank you.
So,
how do you think the music industry's changed?
It's massively changed. I mean, obviously at the time, I was dealing with all the top promoters, Harvey Goldsmith, and every promoter was coming to Lancaster. It was on the major circuit. I still got the advert for. When I resigned at the end of '84, I had a whole string of acts lined up, including Dire Straits, who were playing 6 nights at Wembley, 4 nights at the NEC, and Lancaster University were the only dates they were doing in the country. So we were at that stature. Harvey phoned me up in '83. I got a message. Phone Harvey Goldsmith's office, so I phoned him once and said, yeah. He said, I want to do May the 14th. And I said, May the 14th? And I don't think I'll be able to do May the 14th. It's nearly finals. So finals are about that time. And you got a moratorium on new noise around finals time. So I went and checked it, and no, actually it was a Saturday. Finals actually started on the Saturday. You normally start on the Monday, but for some reason that year they started on the Saturday. So I got back onto him. I said, no, I can't do it. And so I got 4 more phone calls that day, and I said, I can't do that date. And I said, what's it for? And he said, local bands competition. And I said, this is the guy who does Live Aid and everything, right? So I said, Harvey Goldsmith does not do local bands competitions. What do you want it for? I said, if you want any chance of me getting it, what do you want it for? And he said, well, yesterday I'm doing the European Outdoor Festival tour of the Rolling Stones, and yesterday Mick Jagger personally came into my office and said, I want to do Lancaster University as the warm-up date for the European tour. And I said, how on earth did that? Why? Sort of thing. And he said, well, he was talking to Van Morrison, and Van Morrison said Lancaster is the greatest venue that he's ever played, and you've got to play it before you die, kind of thing. So Harvey said, oh God. So I must admit, I did go across to the Vice-Chancellor's office and said, Professor Reynolds, I said, our finals start on the Saturday. And he said, yeah. I said, could you sort of start them on the Monday? And he looked at me, why? I said, well, the Rolling Stones want to play Lancaster. And he said, Mr. Luke, once he said Mr. Lucas, I knew I was in trouble. So I said, Mr. Lucas, he said, the students are here to pass exams, not to go to pop concerts. And I said, yeah, but if you asked them what they'd rather do on that Saturday, see the Rolling Stones or sit a maths exam, I said, go away. So I didn't. So we didn't have the Rolling Stones. But the idea that the bands and promoters were interested or would contemplate playing at a university shows how important it was. But it was important because bands needed to sell product. They couldn't make money out of going on the road. They were taking 4 or 5 ton lorries full of articulated lorries full of equipment. They were taking probably 10, 15 road crew on the tour, the bands themselves, management, whatever. So they always lost money, but they did it to sell product because you didn't get downloads back in those days. People went out, and you could sell 1 million copies of a piece of vinyl. So that's where the money was made. So they wanted to play. I remember Free being really massive. All Right Now was out, and they were doing like a 30-day tour. And I remember talking to Chris Blackwell at Island Records, and said, Why are you playing 1,500 capacity venues? Free are massive. He said, yeah. He said, but in that town, that 1,500, that sells out in a day. Then there's about 3,000 people around who want to get tickets, can't get tickets. The newspapers run previews, run reviews. Everybody talks about the gig. All the record shops are full of the new album and window displays. It's to sell the product. We're not. Of course, yeah. And that's how the music has changed, because you don't get that anymore. The nearest you get is probably the festival circuit. Where you go and see 30 bands on a festival, if you remember where you should be at a given moment in time to see them. But that's the nearest you're going to get to it now. So promoting is different now.
Is it due to you think it's the amount of music produced, or is it the fact that live music as a ticket is being undervalued? Do you reckon being swallowed up by conglomerates like Live Nation?
I mean, yeah, that has been a problem, and Live Nation aren't interested in selling records or selling, whatever you want, whatever form of live music you want, you go and play in your bedroom. They're not interested in that because they don't get any money out of that. So what they're interested in is the big shows. So they've actually ended up buying up the venues, the big venues. So even if they don't own the venue, they own all the food in there, they own the booze in there, they own the cloakroom in there. So they own the company that sells you the tickets, they've just bought out the business. I mean, I was talking to a couple of promoters, big promoters, and they're still big promoters, but basically we've given up trying to compete on that kind of level, you know. So you could never do today what I did back then. It's totally changed now, and it's the same for. I mean, the sad thing is, it's the same for bands. I mean, in those days, I got quite a few local. We had some really good local bands there, and you know, a few of them said, "Will you manage us?" And I said, "No, I'm not hungry enough. I don't want to go and sit outside somebody's door in London until they listen to your, you know, demo." But there was a pathway that you could see. You could play local clubs. You could build up a little audience, get a date in London, get a record company along to see you, get signed by a record company who then give you, you know, it wasn't unusual to get given 100 grand, 150 grand. So you don't have to work for 2 years. You just produce music. And you sold your soul. They didn't give you it. They took it off your record sales. But there was a pathway there, and that you could say that's how. And as I said to you earlier, that you started off at clubs and pubs, built up that following. Then you went on to colleges. Then you went on to city halls, and then later on the bigger venues opened, like the NEC, etc., and Wembley, indoor Wembley. I mean, so there was a clear pathway. There isn't that anymore for bands. So now it's all through social media.
Who you know,
yeah,
and catching lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
Sure, and so like we talk about like these places owning venues. Like if I think of, surely the Great Hall's protected because it belongs to Lancaster University.
Yeah.
If I think of the Manchester the SU bars in Manchester, are they O2 bars?
No, yeah, they've sold them out.
Is Manchester University SU?
Yeah.
Their venue is now also being taken by owns the Apollo.
Yeah,
and, I don't think it's got the Albert Hall. I think the Albert Hall's still the Albert Hall, but.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and again, it was, but even when I was incredibly successful in terms, in terms of the artists we had on and the fact that it was making money for the student union, there was only at the end the biggest point was probably early 80s. There were about 12 student unions went on and professionalised 11 more professionalised their rents. And some of those guys went on and are big names in the business. I mean, Elliot Rashman, who got the job at Manchester Poly, ended up managing Simply Red, you know. So he asked my advice, and I said, no, stick with your job at the Poly. You've just got it, or you're establishing it. You're big fish, small pond, that's how you do it. So I said, well, this guy I've been managing for a few years. I saw him singing in a pub, and he's really good, and he's cost me a fortune at the moment. I've never made any money out of him, but I really believe in him. I said, don't be silly. Anyway, about 2 years later, he phoned me up and says, you won't be able to get me for a while. I've got to go into tax exile. So I said, oh, you didn't take my advice then? No. Right. But what I'm saying is that there were student unions then who started to realise, because I used to lecture at NUS, I said, why on earth, at the SUSOC conferences, with Student Union Senior Officers Conference, why on earth would you think you're running a shop? Yeah? Who's running it? Well, my shop manager. Yeah, not a student. Don't be silly. Right. Who's running your bar? A student? No, my bar steward. Who's running your travel agents bureau? A student? No. Well, why on earth are your rents run by a student who is basically creating a job for himself in the music business? He's got 1 year to make a name for himself, and then he gets offered a job in London, you know? Why on earth are you doing that? If you've got a good social set, give him a job, keep him there, that's what you should be doing. You look upon it as a business. And of course they didn't for years and years and years, lost money, and now they're I think they're neglecting their duties, basically, but what they've done is just say, it's too risky. Promoting live music is a risky business. There aren't many rich promoters, you know. They live from the next tour is financing their living today. They're selling the ticket money. They're using the ticket money of 3 months' time, and then when they get there, they hope they've got another one 3 months after that, you know. So they've bitten the bullet and said, we can't compete. we'll sell our entertainments, or we'll sell your entertainments, if they were really honest, talking to the student body, to an outside company, you know. So giving it away. And of course they don't just do the entertainments, they'll be taking the bar or certainly a percentage of it, etc.
Do you think there's any way of getting like Lancaster back onto the main circuit to be able to compete with like Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds up in the north?
Yeah, I mean it's not impossible. I tell you what, I'll answer that question better in about 3 weeks' time, because it's 40 years since Lancaster had an act on in the Great Hall stage. 40.
What was the last act?
Do you know? I can't remember. It wasn't New Order, but New Order were probably the penultimate act before that.
Right. The start of a rave scene.
Hey, do you know the first ever playing of Blue Monday, the biggest selling 12-inch in the history of music, and it always will be forever because they don't produce 12 inches anymore, was in Sugar House.
We can say
nowhere else in the world. That was first played. John Peel was playing that day, and he got off the train and came out and had a case of records with him, and he says, "I've just had this set white label sent through by this band. I haven't played it yet. I'll play it tonight." Blue Monday. I forgot where I started. Oh yeah, getting it back. So 40 years. There was never a live album done up. There's a few bootlegs around. I've got a brilliant bootleg of AC/DC at Lancaster, but there's never been a live at Lancaster like there was been live at Leeds, John Martin live at Leeds. But Massive Wagons, the local band, who are doing two.
They hit the charts.
They hit the charts.
Yep. They're number one.
Yeah, but they've done the last two albums have been number one, or maybe in three. But the national charts, they entered at 5. This one, you know, this is your Ed Sheeran type charts. Not, you know, I mean, they don't keep at 5, but they entered at 5. The previous one entered at 9. But anyway, they're doing 2 shows and recording live, and they're going to release a live album on it. 19th and 20th of September. The 20th, the Saturday's already sold out, and there's only probably about 100 tickets left for the Friday. So I would guess it'd sell out. They've got 2 weeks to go. I guess it would sell out. So yeah, ask me in 3 weeks' time. But there's no reason why it couldn't. It just needs it needs people to want it to happen. I mean, I was pushing it because I was the senior officer in the Students' Union, so I could get my way around the bureaucracy of the university, because they didn't really want to take us on in a battle. But now we have an outside promoter was the thing. You know, the red tape is just ridiculous. But if the university wants it to happen, it would happen. It could happen, because you haven't got a venue. Guildhall's gone now. You haven't got. You haven't got a venue between Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, Edinburgh. So anybody doing any kind of tour, you know, playing a few dates.
You're South Lakes coming here.
Yeah. Really? Oh yeah. Oh, I did. Yeah. I mean, that was the myth about Lancaster University, because most people, most universities had closed houses, so only students could go there. Lancaster never is. I said that before. So our audience is probably 60% non-student. I had ticket agencies in Barrow, Kendal, Windermere, Penrith, obviously Lancaster, Preston, Blackburn, Burnley, and 3 in Blackpool. So, you know, and that was a physical. You went and got a ticket. You had to queue up outside the door and get a ticket, you know. I mean, when we had Van Morrison on, it was the first date he'd done for 8 years, live dates. He did about 8 dates in the country, one of which was Lancaster, and that was only because a close friend of mine was doing the tour, because he said no universities, no stand-ups. Well, Lancaster was a university under stand-up, so it was going to be. So he had to fly out to America to persuade him to play Lancaster. Well, he did that for me. And we put tickets on sale. It was going to be on sale at 9 o'clock. the student union were on the 3rd floor. There were people sleeping on the floors all the way down, sleeping in Alexandra Square. Every record shop had to open at 8. The police insisted on the record shops opening at 8 o'clock and sell the tickets. We sold out half an hour before they went on sale. Because it was just amazing all around the northwest of England, and that it's a good one.
It does require people to go out there and go see a show. It
does indeed, and and the trouble is, if you don't use it, you lose it, and so many venues are closed. Prime example is the Cantina's closing, and that's sad. I went to look around the cantina when it first was starting open. I was going, you might have a struggle here, but actually they've done really well, and they've had some excellent bands of national stature on there, and it's closing. I mean, I don't know the background story, so I can't make comment.
All that's left is you can book the town hall. It's your only other mid-sized venue, which can cost an arm and a leg.
We've managed to get it once.
We've had it once.
Yeah, we managed to get it once.
I went to see...
The Sugar House is the other option.
Yeah, the Sugar House is the other option. There's 3 options opened in Morecambe. And the Winter Gardens in Morecambe is going to be next summer. It's going to be up to 1,600 capacity, which is quite good. Yeah.
Of course, the Eden Project is on its way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if we all live that long, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, they've still got this stupid concept. I mean, I've been down to Eden down south, and they've got a lovely sort of 5,000 capacity outdoor venue, but actually the weather is slightly different in Cornwall than it is on the northwest coast of England, and I just wonder how many outdoor gigs you can put on in the English summer.
2 round here, I think.
Providing you're allowed to move them slightly. You can't do Saturday, but Sundays looks good. Yeah, so there's the platform, which is sort of 400, 450 seated, but if you turn it round, it's 1,000 stand up. There's also used to be the Carlton.
Carlton is still open, I think.
Yeah. Well, no, it has. It's reopened. That's why it's changed its name and just gone blank. Alhambra, yeah, that's right. Because it used to be the Alhambra donkeys years ago. There's a theatre in there. But
who played? Aldi in Morecambe, I think, back in it.
The Who, the Beatles, the Stones have all played. Well, it wasn't so much. It was the Floral Hall. I mean, they did play the Winter Gardens, most of those, but the band, the one that had the most bands on was the Floral Hall, which is basically where Aldi is now along there. It was that I don't, but I mean that was back in the day, the early 60s, when all the bands toured and played cinemas and things like that, because there weren't the venues in those days. That's what. Sorry. I was going to say that's the problem with somewhere like Lancaster. I can't see. You forget Morecambe was a holiday resort, and a big holiday, an important holiday resort. So it had the venues. I mean, it's lost 3 piers. They had piers on the end that I used to do shows, and one of the piers was 1,500 capacity. So they had those. They and still have the remnants of those venues that are slowly getting opened up. Johnny's have bought Hitchens next door, and that's an 850 capacity venue downstairs, and I think he's doing the upstairs as well as bars and things, so it'll be a bigger venue. So that's quite a good. I mean, they're not purpose built, but they can be used purpose built in terms of theatre and acoustics and all that kind of stuff. But so Lancaster's got the town hall, as you say, which is a nightmare to get hold of, and it's a nightmare because you know. I mean, I've done shows in there for the student union when we couldn't get the Great Hall and things like that. So we have done shows in there. And I went to one about 2 or 3 months ago that Kendall Calling did in there. 1,000.
Frank Turner, right?
It's Frank Turner, yeah. 1,050, I think. Yeah, there's something like that. So there is there, but the Great Hall is, purpose built in a way. It's because it's there built as a place to put concerts on, So it's got dressing rooms, it's got toilets, it's got an unloading bay, it's got a big stage, it's got clearance. So Yeah, you could.
You'll see it's returned use to it. Maybe you might see us there one day.
Yeah. It'd be great. Yeah.
Turn off Backy Joe and Foley at the town hall. That'd be fun.
Well, my dad used to put contemporary music on there. Actually, it'd be full circle for me. I get my.
Yeah. Well, in a way, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I've been No, I haven't been dragged in at all. I was approached. I knew the band, and I'd booked Massive Wagons to support. I was doing a charity show up in Kendal with Status Quo, and I put Wagons on because I used to teach. I went to primary school teaching after I did this, right? So, I spent the last 16 years of my working life as a primary school teacher, and I did Deep Purple at Nebworth with 80,000 bikers, and it's less scary than 37-year-olds or 8-year-olds in a classroom, I must admit, if you're losing control. But so I taught a couple of the band. So I'd heard the CD, and I thought, it's the first CD, and I thought, it's all right, but it's sort of a bit cliched rock kind of thing. And then I went to see him live, and I was knocked out. So I got him on, much to the chagrin of the other people on the committee that were running this. And we'd never heard of this band. I said, don't worry. And they blew Quo off the stage. They were fantastic. So, in a way, I've been sort of helping out, a bit of advice here and there with Wagons, and the fact is it will be a full circle for me, because they're recording a live album as well after 4 years, so I can say brilliant. I can now die happy.
Amazing.
What are the details for the Massive Wagons gig?
It's available. Tickets are available through their website, and you can just it's I think it's £30 a ticket. I think it is. Kids can go over the age of, I think it's 8. That was a long negotiation with the university.
It's also worth mentioning that Toast, a takeaway next to the Gregson on Moor Gate, is offering a discount, I believe. Stuart,
yeah, they are.
What's the discount with the Wagons ticket, please?
Okay, special exclusive deal
We'd like to bring Stuart on. Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Thank you, Stuart, for putting this conversation together as well.
Yeah, it's been very interesting listening to it. I'm looking forward to see the finished version. But yeah, the Gregson. First of all, Toast, my little restaurant, was chosen as the official caterer for Wagons and their crew during that weekend. So we're looking forward to that. I spoke to the Gregson, and they kindly agreed all weekend to allow us to put on a 20% discount for ticket holders who buy food or drink all through the weekend over the bar in the Gregson.
So if you go in there and get 30 pints, you're virtually getting a free ticket.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's the date of the Massive Wagons?
19th and the 21st.
Yeah. No, 19th and 20th. The 20th sold out the Saturday, so it's only the 19th.
The 20th of September.
Cool. The deal at the Gregson is the 19th, 20th and 21st.
Cool. We'll get me an unofficial after party. You'll find me and Faye at the Gregson. We basically live there.
Sour
Right.
We were there this weekend.
Last weekend before. We're always there. I'm there tonight.
I know the feeling. But when we're talking back on just going on when you talk about venues, I mean, the whole point of what I wanted to do with the Sugar House, and Jeff Campbell, who was my assistant at the time, was that the Great Hall was having all these shows on. So you were saying, are you going to watch such and we wanted to put live music on the Sugar House. We said Saturday night, okay, we'll do a disco. But the Thursday night and Sunday night and Friday night sometimes we're doing live ice. And we put on Simply Red, Stone Roses, Eurythmics, Lenny Henry, the Young Ones, Ben Elton. There's a whole string of. Grandmaster Flash came straight out of the studio in Newcastle and came up with his coach. Jumped on his coach at Newcastle TV studios, got off in a back alley in Lancaster in full regalia, walked into this little dingy club in the centre. It was a very surreal experience. So it can be done, but that's what we're trying to do. We're saying, look, this, if you some up and coming out, Go West played. I had to put a disco on to get anybody there. It's the disco sold out. Go West just wanted to play live, so anyway, so they did the gig. But if you were a student being asked to pay whatever £2 or £3 to go and see an act, then, or you could pay £10 and go and see Tina Turner and Eric Clapton the week before, you're going to say, sorry, that's so. If I put anything on in the Great Hall which wasn't a superstar, I lost money. So that's why I wanted to build. I wanted it to be like the Marquee. You can go to the Marquee, or you could go into the Marquee in London, knowing that you're going to get good acts. So you were going to get a good night out. It wasn't going to cost you a fortune. And sooner or later, you would see a superstar starting, and that's what I wanted for the Sugar House. And that was the fallout with the executive, because they were saying live music is risky. And I said, well, I know it is. That's why I'm putting discos on 2 nights a week. So we're not taking the risk away from the live music. But you've got to see further ahead. And that's the point of me being a full-time, because I could see further ahead. They were elected officers for a year, then they were pissing off to be a banker or something,
Any momentum?
Yeah. Any forward planning or anything, that's the thing. And you have to do that if you want to be a promoter.
Of course.
You also need your head testing if you want to be a promoter. But other than that,
Our heads definitely need testing.
We sometimes put them to the test against each other.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, but I mean, there's a couple of good promoters in locally who do Nice and Sleazy and the other punk festival, which is always sold out in around November time, and they do other shows as well. But you can make a living out of it, but you've got to know what you're doing and believe in what you're doing.
Believe in the music you put on.
Yes. But don't put your favourites on.
Don't put your favourites on, Jack.
Okay.
Crikey.
I think that's wrapped up.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
I should all turn away, guys. Thanks very much, Barry, Lucas, Faye, Oliver, Adam, Jack Boynton, I'm here, Stuart. And that was a conversation with 3 promoters, I guess.
Yeah. 1 old, 1 and 2 young ones.